Governor Mike DeWine outlines his plans for the future of Ohio. We break down the three big issues he says he wants to focus on in the budget. And J.D. Vance introduces his first legislation as a U.S. Senator, what he says needs to be done to crack down on catalytic converter theft. Plus,
the law has been passed, the law has been changed, but we need to understand that as election officials. We need to educate our voters.
we look at what you can expect next time you go to the polls and what's being done to make sure every voter is on the same page. Good morning and thank you for joining us for Face the State. I'm Tracy Townsend. We start this morning with a breakdown of Governor DeWine's State of the State address. In it, he outlined his proposed budget and how it will impact you and your family. The three big takeaways focused on taxes, mental health, and education. Let's start with education.
But tragically, today, 40% of all Ohio third grade students are not proficient in reading. 40%. So today, I'm calling for a renewed focus on literacy and on the way we teach reading in the state of Ohio. Not all literacy curriculums are created equal. And sadly, many Ohio students do not have access to the most effective reading curriculum. So in our budget, we're making sure that all Ohio children have access to curriculum that is aligned with the evidence-based approaches of the science of reading. Our budget directs the Ohio Department of Education to lay out a plan informed by research and evidence to ensure that all Ohio students have the best opportunity to master the skill of reading. Further, our budget directs them to help students in our public, our STEM, and our charter schools by providing funding to each school to pay for curriculum based on the science of reading and for professional development for those teachers needing it in that curriculum.
Governor DeWine also announced plans to expand access to charter schools. The governor told us mental health is one of his top priorities in the next term. Here's what he thinks needs to happen to get every Ohioan the help they need.
The budget that I'm releasing today is centered on, one, building a community care system that increases prevention efforts. Two, offering better crisis response services and treatment options. Three, growing our behavioral health workforce. And four, focusing on much needed research and innovation. In this budget, you will see growing investments to expand what's working. And now we're going to take them to all 88 counties, including the following. Treatment and counseling services delivered either in person or through telehealth visits to people directly in their homes and in their workplaces. Suicide prevention to end the needless loss of our brothers and our sisters. Support for our youngest Ohioans so they can have a great start to life and get help at the earliest sign of a behavioral health need. Expansion of the crisis care system and the new 988 hotline so fewer Ohioans end up in the emergency room. And increased access to state hospitals and private psychiatric hospitals to ease stress on families, emergency departments, courts, and jails. Further, we're proposing a one-time investment to expand the capacity of our pediatric behavioral health care system to address the shortage of behavioral health professionals serving children and to expand critical facilities.
The governor also had some welcome news to many families with a promise to push for a cut in some taxes.
To ease the financial burden on new parents, our budget asks you to repeal the state sales tax on critical infant supplies such as diapers, wipes, cribs, car seats, strollers, and safety equipment. Further, I'm also asking you to enact a $2,500 per child state tax deduction. Our budget will make available child care for more working families. Many Ohio parents must choose between taking on full-time, full-year work or staying unemployed or underemployed because they cannot afford the high cost of child care. Through our budget, 15,000 more Ohio children and working families will have access to high-quality child care that will help them start kindergarten with the skills needed to succeed.
Following DeWine's State of the State address, the Democrats gave a response. Here's part of it, focusing on the economy.
The baseline why we have low staffing issues is because we have low wage issues. It's the low wages, not competitive wages for folks. That is the first step towards that. Again, I could argue that not allowing families to make those critical personal decisions about how and when or if to start a family will actually drive workers out of Ohio, not bring them to Ohio. So I think we have some more talking to do about that.
10 TV's Kevin Landers also talked one-on-one with House Minority Leader Allison Russo after DeWine's speech.
The governor mentioned a lot of things about education, about improving safety. Was there anything then from the Democrat side of you that you felt he didn't address that he should have?
Well, I think for us, the discussion about education, we were pleased to hear about the funding of the Cup-Patterson plan or the Fair School Funding Plan. Not as pleased to hear his discussion of a pretty massive expansion of voucher programs. So we will take a look at that. I anticipate that will be hotly debated during the budget discussions. There was also talk about school safety. I think some good things in there, physical safety, but really not addressing the root cause of some of the safety concerns at school, and that is increased gun violence in our communities. So we will be continuing to have those discussions and pushing those issues forward. But otherwise, I think there was a lot of alignment.
So there was nothing in there that you felt he waxed over or didn't address that you felt as a Democrat platform that you wanted to see him push through?
Well, I did like that he talked about, continued focus on maternal and infant mortality. But again, we know that in order to really have successful outcomes in that space, it's more than just home visiting. And it's also about targeted resources in communities. So again, the devil is in the details and seeing what those programs will look like. I will say, one of the other things that I was disappointed I didn't hear a lot of discussion in was there was a lot of talk about nursing home care, but the vast majority of care delivered to our older adults actually happens in communities, and we have a shortage of workforce. They are underpaid, those personal care assistants and those community services for our older adults.
He talked about mental health and improving mental health, but not a lot of details about how you're going to retain people, how you're going to encourage, incentivize people to join those forces. You can expand all the hospitals you want, but if you don't have the people to care for these children that are struggling, what does Ohio do? I don't know if the Democrats have a solution for that.
Well, we know that the behavioral and mental health care workforce is a huge issue, not only in the state of Ohio, but really this is a national issue. So this is not going to be a quick solution. This is going to have to be a long-term investment and plan that likely we will not see the results of until after many of us leave here in the legislature.
Are you willing to work with Republicans? There's a division among the Republican Party about who should be in control, and the Democrats are the minority. How much of your agenda can you really get through in a state house where it's a supermajority?
Well, listen, I think that there are lots of areas where we have alignment and agreement, or can come to some sort of alignment and agreement. And that's really what I think the Democrats are going to be focused on this General Assembly, is finding those places like we have always done. It takes 50 votes to get anything through this General Assembly in our chamber, and I think we've proven that you can get to 50 votes, even with the division amongst the Republican caucus, but it's going to take Republicans and Democrats.
In DeWine's address, he also promised to offer funding for school resource officers.
Oftentimes, there's a trust that gets built between students and the officer that would not otherwise occur, but for that officer being in the school every single day.
In the proposed budget, both public and state schools will be able to afford school resource officers, SROs as they're called for short, if a district requests that. But this does raise the question, can all law enforcement agencies staff those positions within our schools? That's the challenge in Delaware County. 10 TV's Lacey Crisp explains why.
Having the kids know that we're there, in addition to keeping them safe, to be a mentor, to be an educator, to be someone they can trust and go to.
Delaware County Sheriff's Deputy Doug Simila has spent 17 years in the schools as a school resource officer and says he loves being able to interact with the kids.
The Delaware Area Career Center is just one of nearly a half dozen schools in the county that are asking the sheriff's office for more school resource officers. Sheriff Martin tells me he's looking to hire at least 6 deputies to fill those positions.
Well, yeah, that's been a demand from our local school districts. I mean, we have a great working relationship with our local school districts. They see the benefit of the school resource officers.
In a statement, a representative from Olentangy Schools said, "We can confirm that Olentangy Schools plans to add 3 additional school resource officers next school year. This will allow for a dedicated school resource officer at each of our middle schools while still providing support at the elementary level." Parents we spoke with explained why they like having SROs on campus.
And I think really bridges a communication gap, a comfortability gap, a relationship gap that may exist if you never interact with people except in maybe difficult circumstances.
I believe we need to have them in there.
In a recent community survey the Delaware County Sheriff's Office conducted, 88% say SROs enhance school safety and reduce violent crime, which is why Martin will increase the SRO unit from 11 to 17 by the beginning of the next school year.
Well, we think our school resource officers have had a very positive impact on reducing crime. Sometimes you don't know what you're preventing.
In Delaware, Lacey Crisp, 10 TV News.
And when looking at other districts, Columbus City Schools ended its contact with Columbus Division of Police and the SRO program. Instead, it has its own security department. A second person was killed by a wrong-way driver in a matter of weeks. In this latest incident, a victim was a Central Ohio mother of 3, killed in Pickaway County. ODOT tells us about the new technology being tested on our roads to help detect wrong-way drivers. And we've been telling you about the problem of stolen catalytic converters. Now our coverage is prompting a push for change in Washington, D.C. We'll break down the proposed Parts Act. There's a push in Washington, D.C. to tackle an issue 10 TV has been reporting on for months. We're talking about catalytic converter thefts. Senator J.D. Vance partnered with 3 other senators to introduce what's called the Parts Act. PARTS is an acronym for Preventing Auto Recycling Thefts. This legislation would require new vehicles, catalytic converters, to have a traceable identification number. It would also make the theft of catalytic converters a criminal offense. We talked with Senator Vance about the bill and whether he thinks it's going to get passed into law.
The one good thing about this legislation, in divided Washington, it's very hard to get anything done, of course, without Democrats participating. I'm, of course, a Republican, but we've got a couple of Democratic folks who are also co-sponsoring this legislation. So I think there's a chance that on this catalytic converter issue, we can make some progress.
$12 million is coming to the city of Columbus for safety upgrades. The project is going to focus on Livingston Avenue West from 18th Street to Nelson Road. Senator Sherrod Brown announced the investment is part of the infrastructure law. The money will be used to make the area safer for people who are walking or biking. This week, Columbus residents weighed in on the city's plan to decrease the speed limit downtown to 25 miles per hour. Right now, many roads in downtown Columbus are at 35 miles per hour, but the city's leaders are trying to change that, they say, to keep pedestrians safer. Everyone who signed up to speak at the hearing last week was in favor of the plan. One resident, though, we talked with afterwards, says she doesn't want more enforcement. She wants barriers in place.
I bike, but I also drive, and I know it's really easy. I have caught myself going 40 miles an hour, 45 miles an hour on Summit because it's straight and there are no barriers. So I don't want enforcement. I want the roads designed in a way that is centered around people and that's safe for the families, the people with their pets, and the students that live in the outskirts of Columbus.
Council members say the goal is to pass this legislation this month and then to have the new signs and traffic signals up by early March. A recent deadly crash is drawing attention to the dangers of wrong-way drivers. 10 TV's Brian Somerville talked with ODOT about what's being done to keep drivers going in the right direction.
I guess God needed her more than we did. He got one of his angels back. Her family wanted you to hear that quote. They wanted you to see these pictures. They wanted you to know one picture wasn't enough, so they sent me two. In one, the selfless, fantastic mother of three. The other shows that smile, that giving personality. Pictures of Tisha Nida, who died on US 23 in Pickaway County at the intersection of Radcliffe Road after another driver was on 23 going the wrong way. Matt Bruning with ODOT says the chances of wrong-way drivers 0.01%.
However, when they occur, they're 40 times more likely to be dead.
In the last 6 years, ODOT has pumped millions of dollars into combating the issue, from multiple layers of additional signage, striping on the ramps, and in some cases, flashing lights, as shown here in a video from March of 2016, showing a driver going the wrong way at I-670 and Neal Avenue.
Have we done everything we can do? Because I know we have those things in place.
Mm-hmm.
People are always going to look at these kind of stories, though, and say, what else can we do?
Well, and we're always asking that question, too.
Bruning says since 2018, there have been 464 wrong-way driver crashes, with 82 deaths. The biggest factor, he says, impairment. Another factor, time.
By the time I realize it, pick up my phone, call 911, get
You're
patched
miles
through.
away.
Oh, yeah, you're miles apart. And who knows where that driver has gone.
Bryant Somerville, 10 TV News.
Bruning says ODOT is always looking at new technology for wrong-way drivers. Right now, ODOT's testing new cameras that can detect wrong-way drivers and alert law enforcement. So we'll be watching for that. When you go to vote in the next election, some things are going to be different. We take a look at why those who run the local elections asked for some of those changes. And a new proposal in Washington, D.C. aims to make Black history a part of every student's classroom experience. And it's coming from an Ohio lawmaker. We've been following the concerns over new voting law changes that kick in for the May primary. The law takes away some forms of accepted photo ID at the polls. The law also eliminates early voting on the Monday before Election Day, eliminates most August special elections, and shortens the deadline to apply for absentee ballots by mail. We did talk with the Ohio Association of Election Officials about these changes, and they say some of them they specifically asked for.
A real easy one is to allow 17-year-olds who are juniors in high school to serve as poll workers. Right now, the law says you can be 17, but you have to be a senior. We get a lot of poll workers from our schools, and it's great because young people are energetic and excited, and our older poll workers, our more seasoned poll workers, love having them there because they understand technology and they can lift heavy things, which is really good. We also did request that the Monday of early voting be eliminated, and that those hours that people are able to vote now on Mondays be put back into the voting schedule, so there's no actual reduction in the number of hours that people can vote. It's really important to my folks to have as much time as necessary to prepare for Tuesday. Tuesday still is the big show. The majority of Ohioans still vote on Election Day. You're looking at 2.5 million people in presidential years, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done those last 24 hours. The other change we requested that was really important to us was to move the deadline for requesting an absentee ballot. Truly, if you request an absentee ballot at noon on Saturday, it is very, very, very unlikely that you're going to receive that ballot in the mail in enough time to vote it and get it back to us in time to be counted. So we ask that they move that deadline back to about a week before the election to allow the mail plenty of time to get folks their ballot. They can look at it, fill it out, get it back to us, and then we can count that ballot.
We also asked the Franklin County Board of Elections what they're doing to make sure every voter knows about these changes.
We will certainly be aggressively out on our social media sites, our websites, explaining to voters the changes to the laws. Our poll workers, we're in the process now of reviewing all of our training data materials that we train to our poll workers, and there's quite a few things that are in there that we're having to update. So it's a busy time, but as in past elections, if somebody goes to the polls, certainly we're not going to turn them down if they don't have the proper identification. If they want to go back to get the proper identification that they would need, or they would simply cast a provisional ballot at that location.
They anticipate getting more direction from the Secretary of State in the coming weeks. While we honor Black History Month, Black men and women are leading the charge to make sure history isn't forgotten in Ohio schools. U.S. Representative Joyce Beatty, who represents the 3rd District, spoke a little about that challenge this week.
Right now, Black history is under attack. And when Black history is under attack, American history is under attack.
Black history in education has been hotly debated since Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis threatened to ban a specific AP course on African American studies in his state. Let's take a look at what Congresswoman Beatty is proposing. The Black History is American History Act would require schools that get funding from the presidential and congressional academies to include Black history as part of the American history and civics courses. It would also promote the use of education resources offered by the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And it encourages the inclusion of Black history on tests. She was once the most powerful woman in Ohio, and now she's sharing her experiences with the hopes of uplifting others. We're talking about retired Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor, who joined the Columbus Metropolitan Club this week. O'Connor stepped down in December, ending her term as the first Chief Justice to retire from the office. She took several questions that afternoon, including one from the crowd about supporting women in their careers.
Well, I think it's, very important for women who have attained whatever level, of elected office, and not just the judiciary, but elected office, to reach back and, with a helping hand and bring someone along. Identify someone on your staff that, you think would be, suited with mentoring.
O'Connor was the first woman to lead the state judicial branch of government and was the longest serving statewide elected woman in Ohio history. It's been 1 month since Senator J.D. Vance took the oath of office in Washington, D.C. We checked in with him to see how things have been going.
I've enjoyed myself. I've certainly tried to get my hands involved in a number of different issues, from funding overseas military adventures to this new piece of legislation I introduced to try to make it harder to steal catalytic converters. But there are a lot of problems that we have, and the thing I try to remind myself is the Senate is not just a debating society. The people of Ohio don't expect me to come here, sit on my hands and complain about the problems. They actually expect me to do something about them, and that's what I'm trying to do.
We thank you for joining us for Face the State today, and we wish you a great week.